I'll just start with our library Tasmania acknowledgement of Tasmania's Aboriginal peoples. We acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of this land, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future who hold the memories, traditions, culture and hope of Tasmania's First Peoples. Libraries Tasmania also pays respect to the resilience and strength of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people and extends that respect to all First Australian peoples. And I'd just like to hand over to Barry.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I hope everyone can hear me. I don't like to be chained to this lectern, so if I wander, I'll try and keep my voice up. But today, thank you everyone for coming to hear this about house histories. It's a form of family tree for the homes that we live in and the buildings that we occupy. So it's slightly different, but in searching through it, we do employ some of the same records that you do in Ancestry, and also those that apply to buildings. So I hope you enjoy what I've put together. It's somewhat different to what I had last year, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Now, first of all, whenever you do a house history or a home history, please remember one golden rule. The lot number of a property never changes, but the addresses do. For example, I brought along some books today. This one started out as 12 Veterans Row, Hobart in 1825, and it's now 338 Murray Street. Some of you may recognise the building. It's the old Sir Thomas Brisbane Hotel. So please be aware, try at the outset to get a lot number, then you know you're on the property, and we'll relate to a few ways to confirm that you're spot on with that property that you're dealing with all the time. It's very frustrating to get halfway through and find that you're on the wrong block of land. This is that book there. That's the one that's I've just completed. It's a house history. It goes back, actually I said there from the 1830s, but the house was original house was built by the government here, the colonial government, in 1825 to attract veterans from the British Army and the Marines and the Navy to come and settle in Hobart. Now, as I mentioned, I've changed somewhat from last year's presentation because matters are all constantly evolving, and the way I did it in previous years, the way I ran through finding records, I've changed somewhat over the last 12 months because it is changing completely and we've got to keep up with the times, as you know. So this is the way I start. It's just a suggestion. You may prefer to go elsewhere to start at your initial point. Now, the titles office. That's that building in up from the bus stop in Franklin Square, and they have lots of records. In the early days, we used to pay our $50 and go downstairs to the sub-basement and spend all day, get a leave pass for lunch, and go back there and while away to your heart's content to lift up heavy title deed books and go through them and plot the course backwards. Now it's online. There's still a few bugs in it, but anyway, it works, and the titles office staff are very helpful. Now, up to 1972, you can download them for free. After 1972, they're about $52.20. It's $50 plus a $2.20 fee. They have announced that they've frozen their fees for this year and next year, so they should remain the same. But this gives you a lot of information of the property. I suggest when you start that you create an account here. It's free to create it, and you'll see some steps as we go along. Once you've done that, what I normally do is when I have a property, I email or pop in there and ask them their obliging staff, as I mentioned, and I show them what I'm looking for, and they usually give me the first one. They usually give them to me for free. I don't know how it'll be now. And that gives you the title number, it gives you the deed number, and some other factors we'll see in a moment. As I said, you log on, whoops. See up here, log in, and this is where you start. You go to List Data, click on there, then come to your login details. You see my email address and password, and it says there. One point about this slide is see this contact us. If you get into trouble, click on that. It comes up and with an email, and you can write help. And they are very helpful. They are good. Oh, I just put that in twice. Now, these are the two I use. I'll get used to this in a minute. Properties and titles, and this one, Historic Deeds. And has the property ID, has the volume and dealing number and the folio number. And if they give you the first one, the current one, all that information's on there, and you just follow that as you go. This one, the Historic Deeds. As I mentioned before, the title deeds are free from 1862 to 1972. And then pre-1862, it's on a different system called the old titles, before the Torrance title came in. And some of the numbers don't add up to 6 numerals. And when this probably doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment, but when you're putting in and requesting these, you have to put in 6 numerals. It has to add up to 6, the volume and the folio number. Some don't have it. This one only had 7, and you put a 0 in front of it. If that doesn't work, then try fiddling with this number. If it's, say, 3 numbers only. If you can't get any joy out of that, contact them. And the guy I usually contact, Patrick, he's very good. He'll often send them to me. He finds them and emails me the complete documents. He's very good. This is the Tasmanian title deeds. I've taken this one particularly because it has quite a lot of information on it. You can be lucky. You may get only 2 names. You could get more. And when you're paying $52, you hope you get more. This one was very fortunate. Well, it was free, it was before 1972. You'll see up here, that's the volume and folio number of this particular title. The one it replaced is on the left-hand side. So that's the one you've got to go looking for after you've attended to what's on this one. So you're going back in time. So it's right for current and left for the next one further back. This has the names of the person, the name of the person they purchased it from, and fortunately or unfortunately for the owner, the new owner, he died. And so this was all concerned with his will, who he left it to, and who that went to after he had it, and then who he sold it to. So you get quite a wealth of information off it. I said identification and confirming you've got the right property. Another way of making sure you've got it is have a look at the property itself. They're not always rectangular. Sometimes you'll get a little niche out one side or whatever, and you look at it, and it gives it a description as well in acres and perches and rooms. All remember those rooms? And that's on there, and that stays the same all the way through on the documents. So that's a way of making sure, as confirmation, as we do in Ancestry, we like to find supporting documents. That also supports that you've got the right spot. I put this in for a bit of nostalgia. Who remembers the building with the red awnings? That's before the red awnings. You'll notice there's no building on either side of it.
No.
And it was actually a taxi stand. It was a registered taxi stand in the 1870s. And there are taxis waiting for people. I put that in as a little nostalgia in that book because people would have probably taken a taxi from the city up to Murray Street or Veteran Row as it was then.
It looks like there's a little side street going up there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And there's buildings in Davy Street behind it, but there's nothing beside. I thought that was interesting. As I mentioned, this was a pub, and if you look in the library, if you're looking for a certain property that was a pub or a refreshment rooms or a dentist, there are often books on the second floor of the reference room that actually concentrate on those particular types of dwellings, and you go through them and it's amazing what you can find. And this was an excellent book I found. It listed the property, the Sir Thomas Brisbane Hotel. In other pages too, it mentioned different houses in Tasmanian Street, which runs just off Murray Street near where this building is. And it referred to different people that lived in Tasmanian Street in those days. So you get quite a lot of information from them. Now, we come to the place where I used to start. My apologies, Sam.
That's right.
The library. This building has a wealth of information, as you know, for Ancestry, for whatever you do there, but for buildings, dwellings in Hobart and in Tasmania. And this site is invaluable. I often look in this one, and also, of course, Ancestry. You'll notice I took this slide before. They're very kindly allowing us to access Ancestry from home, which has absolutely been fantastic. I've got 2 projects running at the moment. And we can't access the second floor, as you know, it's being renovated. So it's been fantastic to rely on this support, and thank you very much. One aspect they have here, this is one site on the library, researching a building's history. And you'll notice just down here, I just got it in, this is a rather long page, house plans. Now by all means, search the library's indexes for houses. When you go up to the computers up on the second floor or in the reading room, put in the address, see what comes up. It's amazing. I actually found a 1947 plan for this Sir Thomas Brisbane Hotel that was up there. It's a huge big sheet. I wasn't going to stand up, and I had my iPad with me to take photographs of it, but Anthony Black up there kindly and bravely got up on a chair and was taking photographs of it for me, which I was able to put in. And I've done this with other buildings as well, from this site. Go back to the land grants. Start at the beginning. I know we're starting at the present, but go back to the beginning and hope that you meet in the middle, as they did with the Sydney Harbour Bridge. These land grants are rather large. They're in a very large cupboard up there. If you ask any of the staff, they'll take you along, and if you look a bit weak like I do at times, they may even drag it out for you. It's very large. And I do have one on the next slide, a portion of one, of a property I did a project for in Devonport. And this is part of one of the very early land grants that were granted to people in good standing in Tasmania at the time. This is also another one. This is one near my home, and it had to do with the original owners of Blackmans Bay at the beach. It's just there. Valuation rolls. Now these come in many forms, and you saw before the lady standing there and she had a big book, it had wheels on it, but upstairs they have these for valuation rolls. They go from about 1847, 1848 to the 1900s. And it gives you information, as you'll see further along, the name of the owner, or the address, the name of the owner, the occupier, the approved capital value, or whatever it was named then, and the fee, or the sum of the approved capital value. It also, in many cases, will tell you what's on it. Some will say it's just a block of land. Others will say it has a house. And another one I was doing in Hobart, at various stages it told me it had a house and adjacent vacant land, and later on it had a house and a garden and a shed. So I could see improvements were going on at the time. And these are excellent, these valuation rolls. As I mentioned, the early ones upstairs, 1840s to 1900s. This one here is the 1950s, 1971, and it's for all of Tasmania. These continue down. You just keep scrolling down and down and down with different areas until you come to the one you want, and then click on that and go from there. Then there's other valuation, which is this one. This was sent to me from a local council. Now, I always write to local councils, and you get mixed replies from them. Some say, for some reason, that it's not for private information, but I write back and plead with them. I keep going until I get either a reply or they don't reply. Devonport Council were fantastic. They made this up for me for a particular dwelling I was looking for. It gives, and this is very similar to the valuation rolls that are upstairs. It gives the description, dwelling and allotment, and so forth. It gives the owner's name, the occupier, the area, that's what I didn't mention, and the annual value. So that's quite often excellent information to follow through. Now we come to Trove. I'm sure all of you have used Trove. It's a fantastic site. I probably use it, well, I use it every day, sometimes even up to 10 or 12 times a day. I'm on and off it all the time. I became very comfortable with the old system, and I was rather annoyed when they altered it.
A lot of people are.
Yeah, being an old person, you tend to like what you've been accustomed to. And I thought, I saw this notice up at the library, please log into our webinars and have a look at it. And I never did. I thought, oh yes, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll get around to it. I never did, and that caught up with me. So the library has a webinar on Wednesday the 26th of August as part of Family History Month, which goes into finding your way around the new version of Trove. And I've got that in my diary. I'm going to glue myself to it and have a look at it, and I'm sure we'll learn something from it. Now, logging on to this new Trove, we come to the cultural advice firstly, and then to this one, which is similar to the previous one. I always use this column, the phrase. I like this. When I'm looking for a name, say a John Smith, if you type in John Smith up the top here, you'll get Johns, Smiths and John Smiths and people that look like that, and then you have to start filtering. Now, why not filter right at the beginning? In the old system, I used to put in John Smith and put abbreviated commas. Some people put, what do you call them?
Brackets.
Little paragraph.
Yeah.
Kept the name together. Now, I do this with houses and properties. I start off, I'll put, say, 14 John Street, Devonport, and see what happens, put the apostrophe. If I can't find anything in Trove for that, I'll take out the 14. And then I'll fiddle around with John or so forth until I can find some information on it that's relative. And it's amazing what you do find in newspapers. And you'll see some instances here as we continue through. But as I mentioned, use the phrase. It does save a lot of time. Now with this one, I put in library. I just typed this in as by way of an example for today. Came up with 3 hits. And I used this one, letters to the editor. It's not because I myself write a lot of letters to the editor in the Mercury, but it had some interesting information. Now, this mentions a new library being built. This was in, it was 1954, but it was in 1904. Not on this site. It was Davey and Argyle Street, I think, in 1904. And this fellow, I don't know if anyone recognises him, Andrew Carnegie, the philanthropist. He gave £7,500 to build that library in Davey and Argyle Street. And I thought it was rather significant. Now, I was talking about the webinar for Trove, finding the little quirks. I used to get quite annoyed at having this yellow. And it took me a while to figure out how to get it out, which I did on the old system, and it worked very well. When the new system came in, there's not even the spot I used to go to click on to remove it. It had gone. And I thought, oh. So I fiddled around for quite a few days and eventually cracked it. That doesn't have any yellow on it. And if anyone wants to know how it was done, what you do now is you go up to the page, see page 4 there, you left click on page 4 and you get a little box and it says previews at next. You click on next page, and you come to that, and the whole page doesn't have any yellow on it. It's all gone. And then you click back on the page, left click on previous, not on next page, but on previous. Comes back to the page you want, and it's quite clear. So that was one little quirk I picked up from it, and no doubt that'll be in the library's webinar on the 26th of August, plus some extra helpful hints for it. For those that like to travel around New Zealand via the web, Papers Past, that's very similar to Trove, and that's helped me with some projects I've had in the Open North and South Islands. And they've changed theirs slightly. For those that are interested, they've added this what's new, which is good. And you can find, now, what you're looking for in both Trove and Papers Past is not only the building, but if you find names of people associated with the building, start looking for those names as well. And it's amazing what you collect. For the building, you pick up council changes or applications for approval and renovations or things that happen. I had one with this one here. There was a trial, there was a murder, and that was quite interesting and fascinating, and followed it through the newspapers, and it gave the name of the accused, and the crime happened at 338 Murray Street. And that's interesting. So this information you build and add to as you do with your family history books to get a bit of colour into it. And you can find information relative to that. Electoral rolls are useful. I've redone this one from last year, trying to get that fuzz out, but I can't. But the one I was looking for was James Roberts, Mooney, and it gave other people who were living there, and everyone's used the electoral rolls, as you know, with family history, and they're excellent. They're on Ancestry up to 1980, and then after that they're on the second floor in microfiche up to 2008. Might be 2009 now, I haven't looked at them for a little while. But it's amazing the information that you get from them. It doesn't tell you whether they're owners or occupiers, but if you keep finding the same name for 10 years or so, you can gather that they're probably the owners. So that's one help for you, or piece of assistance. The Mercury, this one I used because it gave up that fellow that was on the electoral rolls. He died, and he confirmed the street, the address, 13 Balmoral Street. So the Mercury and other newspapers are excellent for this, although in later years they tend to take the addresses out of bereavement notices for safety's sake. A little bit of nostalgia. Who remembers the copper, the old copper? That's copper. People used to wash in the old fuel stove. I remember a fuel stove when I was a boy. Upright, put the wood in the middle, or the coke, or the coal, and then heated the whole appliance. Rackets blue. It was useful for bee stings too at the time, as well as whitening the sheets and others. And it's this sort of information you put into your book for houses to give it colour. I actually played around with animations. I was trying to get this fellow to move backwards and forwards, but I couldn't quite work it out safely. I got him going, couldn't get him coming back. But who remembers, pardon the French, the Duddy Man? And I thought this was a good photograph showing the houses, and and there's the laneway in the middle. And you can come up with access. They were the days, weren't they? You wouldn't know those.
I do.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Oh. Then not only are we looking at homes, office buildings, but this Victoria Hall, I did as a project about 6 or 7 years ago, and the guy that owned me asked me to look into it and write a book on it, and I did, and it gave some wonderful facts of what it was actually before it became a hall. Then with the name Victoria, it alluded to Queen Victoria and was built for one of the anniversaries of her reign in time. I can't remember the exact year now. And it was an interesting story of what it was before it was actually a hall. It was quite intriguing. This also comes from the second floor. If you look under the works department and the drainage board, you can sometimes find these. This is Victoria Street, and that's all here. And it gave me some information to add to my work. Now, telephones. We in Tasmania embraced this new technology really well. We had telephones here in the 1880s, whatever it was, when Alexander Bell's yelled Eureka. And there are lots of telephone directories upstairs. This is just one from 1953. It gives the name and the address of people that you may be looking for. In fact, I found one for this book here. I was looking for an R.L. Brown, and he's in there, he's up here somewhere, and it gives the address View Street, Blackmans Bay. Heading north for a while, I did one in Lonsdale, Esplanade, and that was quite an interesting project, and that's actually from the 1961 map that's in the library upstairs, and Lonsdale Street's up here, Lonsdale Promenade. And it was quite interesting to go back to the beginning of the century. It was often used for military and band parades, and there was quite a lot of information in the local newspapers about that particular area at that time, which made interesting reading in that book. Then we come to Wise's directories. These are little red books upstairs, once again, in the reference area, and they go for an extremely long period of time. And as you can see, it gives the name. I was looking for a building in Elizabeth Street, 106, 100 to 106. That's it there. It gave the people, also gave the occupations in which they were engaged in that time. That building still stands. It's changed a lot since, and I did that one about 5 years ago. But it was very interesting to have the information, again, taken from the title deeds and the Mercury and the other sources that I've mentioned so far. Again, a little nostalgia, which you can add to your book. I also try and find dress types pertaining to that particular period, or a particular period. And you'll see some of them in the street here, but it's amazing the way women's fashions change. And particularly, say, for example, in World War I, when there was a shortage of material and frocks tended to come up. People say to me these days, what's a frock? They don't know. This is a valuation roll taken in the 1860s. This is like those red books upstairs I mentioned that go through for such a long period. They give names of the occupier, names of the owners, and also sometimes it'll say the estate of the late, and it gives the name of the executors, and that can be very helpful information as well, and you'll find these particularly in the valuation rolls. This is another more modern one, if you will, 1944. You see they don't change so much. They stay much the same, which is good for an old bloke like me. And then much later again, these are valuation rolls from 1954 and also rental rolls. So they're all upstairs, it's just a matter of finding them. Staff are very helpful, they'll find things for you if you're nice to them. Also look outside the square. What's there, what could be there that's different? Now this is upstairs as well. These are records from a dentist. It was in this building in 106 Elizabeth Street in 1912. And it gave the name of the person I was looking for and their address. Or one of the West family that I was looking for. And that can be very helpful indeed. And that's just sitting up there. I don't think it's classified. It's just, oh, no, it's on the computer records. That's how I initially found it. But you've got to go looking for them, and you come across them. Another one I found once was a letter written in 1841 from an Anglican minister. He was writing to his bishop saying, and he put the address and his name, and he was saying that the amount that was offered to him to take up a role in Campbell was unacceptable. So that gave me his address in 1841. That was good. Back to titles again. This is a Victorian one. Oh no, sorry, it's another Tasmanian one. Oh yes, this one here gave me the name of the person that had the property, who she sold it to, and it had a transfer on it as well. So that gave me another name. That was that R.L. Brown I was looking for in the telephone book, Robert Lindsay Brown. Now again, for nostalgia, adding colour. I get on this, if you write a book that's all about facts and names, people get bored. They'll get to page 5 and put it aside. So if you put a bit of colour in it, I've just put a couple in there. This was a momentous year, of course, 1975. Also in that year, we had the bridge disaster with the Lake Illawarra. I should have put that in, and I've got all of that. But there's interesting periods in time, Vegemite, of course, being Australians, and of course, one of my idols, he was born about the same time I was. And of course, this period, I'd say we all remember the events that happened then. Not many of us would know this one. There's quite an account in the Mercury about that, about how the submarine surfaced in Oyster Bay. Imagine, there must have been people around Great Oyster Bay, but they surfaced, took out the seaplane in pieces, put it all together in Great Oyster Bay and flew it off there and spent five hours flying around Hobart. Then came back, dismantled the aircraft, stowed it back in the sub, submerged and went to New Zealand. So they just spent quite a bit of time in Oyster Bay and no one spotted them.
supposed to.
But it gets interest in your book. Channel Heritage Museum, I don't know if anyone's been there. It's quite a
Yes.
good spot to go.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really fun.
It's, it has been closed during the COVID crisis. The president tells me that it's open 2 days a week at the moment, but he suggests that you check the phone or check the site before you go down there. Amazing what you find. I found this hand-drawn map of early Blackmans Bay in the 1940s. Also found some photographs of this home in the 1940s, and I was able to copy those and put in that book. Now, I've got to speed up a little bit. These are interesting. You've probably used these for Ancestry. The nominal roles of the different wars with Australian personnel. This one has an address on it and the next of kin, as well as the person. Has their age. Later ones have their date of birth. This is not me. I don't know who he is. I'm going to track him down one day just out of interest when I get a bit of free time. But this gives information, his date of birth. Down here, if they're prisoners of war, you can then look up other records that are available in Canberra and get information about their time in different prisons in both World War I and World War II. And these also can be found in Vietnam, Korea, as well as these, and the occupation forces in Japan after post-war II, World War II. Wills. Wills are extremely useful. A lot of them give the address, the name, and the executors and the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are useful because they're the name to go looking for other owners of that property that you're searching for. This is the Victorian one. You'll notice it's very similar to ours, and it puts the description of the property and the names of who bought it and who sold it. This was a property I did in Devonport, and I kept it here. I had it last year, but because it's interesting, it mentions, this is from the Advocate. That shows the person's birth and the names of the parents. And of course you'll recognise her. She was actually born there, there's no question about it. She was born in Devonport. Rolleston Hospital, but she lived in Devon, and she came home to this address here in Devonport. Now, post-Trove. As you know, Trove goes up to a bit into the 1950s. It goes up later for some other prints, Women's Weekly and a few others. They can go into the 1970s and 1980s, but mostly it's limited to the 1950s, from 1810 to the 1950s. Now, has anyone used this? Newsbank? Newsbank is excellent. You click on this guy here reading the newspaper. Oh, before I go to change,
What's it called? Newsbank? Is it News?
it's called Newsbank. It's on. You log on to the library website, you go to the family history, and this will come up. Now, it also includes the Herald Sun. Now, we in the library here, we don't have a lot on the Herald Sun, but this includes that. Now, you've got to log in with your library card, and you make a password. It's free to join, and this gives you access to this one. This is what I'm looking at, Newsbank. You'll notice it has Examiner, Advocate, Australian, Herald Sun, and so forth. This is different, that's a different site completely. Now, this gives newspapers, same as you call up in Trove, call up the whole newspaper and use it. And the differing times, but you'll notice 2006, the Advocate, Mercury goes from 1998 to current. It's all there. So you can find information, as you have done for Trove, for later years in Newslink. I suggest sometimes, when you're all familiar with the Ryerson Index, you've no doubt used it, and you haven't, you put a person's name in and the state anywhere in Australia, it comes up with a list of names, date of death, the suburb they lived in, and the newspaper and the date. And you know there's a death notice in that particular paper for that person that they'll be looking. That can be very useful, and I use it in conjunction with Newsbank because then I go back and look around that time for that person, not only to get that particular death notice, but get any other items of interest pertaining to that fellow or to that address. That's very useful. Cuts out a lot of time. Now this was a house history I did in Victoria. I do them all over Australia and New Zealand. The title deeds are now all online, and you write to the different states. There are different charges. The Victorian one, which I had up there, they're the best. They charge $11 per title. New South Wales charges about $50 per title, and New Zealand, if you're looking there, is $15 their money, which is close to ours now. This is something I got from the Age newspaper in 1928. So it's amazing what you can find in newspapers. Who would have thought you'd find that? And this is the original one that I did, it's up there, it's further, the one I just did in Victoria. And it shows the blocks. And I kept looking in the Age around that time, and it gave information of who actually bought the blocks and their occupations, and it was quite interesting. I mean, the Trove and the Newsbank, they're fantastic sites, they really are. Now, that completes my talk, I have a few minutes to leave. But this is not all the sites. There are a lot more that you can look for, both here in the library. Before COVID, I spent at least 2 days a week here in the library, sometimes 3. And in fact, readers come up and ask me questions, and they thought I worked here. But it's amazing the information you can find on this site, and the title is. Now, I've left my email address up there, as I said earlier. If anyone wants some information or wants any help, please contact me. I'm quite happy to get work too, but if anyone wants any help, please give me a call. I had 2 last year I helped, and they were quite helpful, quite happy with that as well. I do talks in service clubs, Rotary, Progress and the like. Got one next month that's been rescheduled. was supposed to be in May and it's now next month. And so if anyone's members of those organisations would like a speaker to come on, we're happy to do so. Not only this, but also a journey home. Yeah, any questions?
Is it possible to get a copy of your presentation with all those slides of examples on, so we know what we're looking for?
Yes, I don't have a copyright on it. I'm quite happy to. If you give me your email address, I'll send it to you. Or if you send me your email, I'll send it back.